Oh. So I wanted to welcome you all to Debate as Everyday Conversation. And so we've got a couple challenge directors on the call. I am Leslie Burns, I used to be a challenge director from Spofford, New Hampshire. Now I'm a support representative. Somebody's talking. But I'm not quite sure. I think Rainey is still muted and maybe Maria is muted. Kimberly's trying to talk. But anyway, welcome to the meeting, and I hope we'll figure it out. I'm going to pray to get us started, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do tonight. Oh, Lord, thank you so much for an opportunity to gather together as tutors and parents and people who are interested in guiding our children to be able to communicate better. I pray that you would help us not to be afraid of the idea of debate and how to do it. I know we have sometimes a lot of questions about that. And so I pray that you would help us to focus our minds on this topic today, that it would be fruitful and that it would be glorifying to you. Thank you that you promise you'll always give us what we need. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Alrighty. I have my husband Tom here with me too. He might be piping in every now and then. He just waved, so that was silent, but he's here giving moral support as well. So I would love to know, I'm wondering, Rainey, you're the only one that I'm not sure what your role is in CC. Is there a level that you're involved in or an age group that you're particularly interested in? So if you want to chat that into me, or you can turn your audio on. Okay, challenge one director. Awesome. And since we have a really small group right now, there might be more people joining us, but feel free to unmute yourself if you're in a place where you can do that and contribute orally. That would be fantastic. What we're going to be covering today, I thought it'd be great to have a real good sort of philosophical underpinning, I guess is the word, of what debate is like and how it's different or how it's the same from regular communication. So that's what we're going to talk about today is we'll talk about what's the goal of communication. And since we're good classical educators, of course, we're going to define communication, maybe have a little 5 common topic discussion. We'll talk about stock issues and values, and we'll talk about what good communication is, and then I'll tell you a story about 2 different ways of communicating. And it'll all be related to debate, so I think it'll be helpful to us. Okay, so Rainey says it's not particularly quiet at her house, so she's going to stay muted, and that's fine. Feel free to jump in if you ever have a quiet moment. And we'll finish up with some resources and Q&A. And of course, you can ask questions at any point during this if something comes to mind. It's a little harder, I know, to chat your questions in, so feel free to ask them if you can. And I will try to keep an eye on the chat box. I'm a multitasker like most women, so we'll see what we can do. All right, so let's start with real-life communication. And let's think about that. I have a couple Proverbs to read for you. And hi, Donna. Good to have you here. A couple Proverbs from Proverbs 15, 16, and 17 here. Just a sampling of some of the great things that God has to say to us about communication. The first one, Proverbs 15:28 says, "The heart of the righteous weighs its answers, but the mouth of the wicked gushes evil." Proverbs 16:21 says, "The wise in heart are called discerning, and pleasant words promote instruction." Proverbs 17:14 says, "Starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before a dispute breaks out." Interesting to think, we're talking about debate, and yet the Bible is saying you don't want to be disputing. So we'll be thinking about that a little bit later. What is the difference? How can debate be good and wise communication instead of a dispute or a quarrel, something like that? couple more verses for us here, just because Proverbs, this section of Proverbs is so rich in thoughts about communication. We have Proverbs 18:2. A fool finds no delight in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. And he who answers before listening, that is his folly and his shame. And finally, Proverbs 18:21. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Hi, Ellen. Good to have you along. So, any thoughts as you think through those verses that have a lot to say about communication? Because debate is a communication activity. What comes to mind? You can chat it or say it when you think about those verses that we've just read. Give you guys a little time to chat and answer in if you have one. And I'll flip back to the slide right before this if I can. It doesn't want to go on that one. This one for Proverbs 15. Yeah, thinking before speaking is probably a good idea, says Kimberly. That is so true. We talked about weighing answers instead of just gushing people. We have here pleasant words promoting instruction. So the idea is to learn, right, and not just to be enjoying thinking, talking, hearing ourselves talk, so to speak. Yeah. When you think about debate also, certainly we are airing our own opinions, but hopefully we are delighting in understanding. Yeah, listening seems to be the key, says Maria, and it's so true. And in debate, you have to listen fast because, there's a whole lot of time to listen. That's why it's a really fruitful exercise for teaching critical thinking and discernment, because they have to listen and get the crux of an argument really fast, and they don't want to misrepresent their opponent. So we have here, Donna says, a big difference between a righteous and an evil person in regards to listening and gushing out. Yeah. So those are great things to be teaching our students as we're trying to think with them about what debate is like. A couple thoughts about some goals in communication. The motto of CC, to know him and to make him known. That has a lot to do with communication. I mean, that's pretty much half of our motto, stemming from a knowledge of God, but then also being able to communicate it in a way that's understandable. And a debate organization that I'm involved with, the NCFCA, a Christian Forensics League, their motto is to teach students to address life issues from a biblical worldview in a manner that glorifies God. I'm going to read that again because there's a lot in there. To teach students to address life issues from a biblical worldview in a manner that glorifies God. That's really what we're trying to do in debate, isn't it? If you had to put in your own words what we're trying to do as we teach debate to our students and our classes, does anybody have another way that they could put that? What are we trying to do? What skills are we trying to hone? What's the goal besides torturing everybody just a little bit? Anybody have a thought they want to chat in or speak up? We're trying to help them to understand issues, right? and then to be able to communicate those. But in all of it, we need to be thinking about doing it in a way that glorifies God. Right? Okay, so here's my question. Do the rules for communication change when I stand behind a podium, when I'm doing a timed debate round, or in my case, my kids are doing it at a tournament trying to win a prize, whether they're doing it in a class or at a tournament? Do the rules for communication change in that situation? Or should we still be having the goals of communication to be wise and to be kind and to preserve relationships? And I think it's pretty obvious that even though the way we do things might be a little different, the goals for communication need to stay the same. So let's talk a little bit about what real life communication is. Who communicates? Think through some people, think through a recent conversation that you had, even this week or today. Who did you communicate with? Probably family. You feel free to chat in or speak in your answers. You might have communicated with students. I'm trusting people are there. I'm not hearing anything, but that's okay. Those of us who went to work might have communicated with an employer or an employee, perhaps with a customer or neighbors, something like that. N-E-I-N-E-I. Boy, it's hard to type under pressure. Do you ever notice that? It's like whiteboard syndrome. Yeah. So there's a lot of different people that we communicate with. We might communicate with people at church, all sorts of places. And what are the things we communicate? We communicate with words, but also with nonverbal communication, right? With gestures, with tone, with attitudes. And we also communicate with our actions, not just with our tongue, right? And where, I'm not even going to fill this out because we communicate everywhere, right? It's not just in the classroom, not just in our families. We communicate everywhere we go. And so that's part of why we're preparing our students to be able to communicate everywhere and with everyone. And again, when, we're pretty much communicating all the time. Even when we're alone at home, we're still often communicating over email, over the phone. We're taking in communication through visual media, through reading, things like that. But here's a good one to think about. Why do we communicate? What are some reasons that we communicate? I'd love for you to type in some answers if you can. What are some things that motivate us to communicate? Okay, I'm asking my husband to put in his 2 cents. He's not quite sure. What are some reasons people communicate?
To get thoughts across to others.
Yeah. So we want to get our thoughts across. Yeah. So usually we want to be understood, right? Sometimes we have a kind of a transaction that has to happen. But looking at the verses that we looked at earlier, it seems like God wants us not just to want to be understood, but to seek to understand, right? And that's a big difference.
Two-way.
To what?
It's two-way.
It's two-way. Yeah, the conversation is two-way. It's not just us speaking. And so same thing in debate. We shouldn't be just speaking. We should be listening and also speaking together. So that's communication in general, but let's look at what good communication is. And I've got a few more verses for us, and then hopefully we could be able to compare good communication and bad communication. So Proverbs 17:19 says, "He who loves a quarrel loves sin. He who builds a high gate invites destruction." And Proverbs 17:22 says, "A man of knowledge uses words with restraint, and a man of understanding is even-tempered." I don't know if you've seen that in your debate rounds. Sometimes I have seen people who are kind of quarreling, and people whose words maybe aren't used with restraint because they get a little uncomfortable in a debate round, and they're really trying to win the round or not feel stupid, and so sometimes they lose their restraint. But here's a key. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. The problem is in a debate round you have to say something. The key is to not keep talking after you run out of things that you know how to say. So if we look at all the things we've thought about, think about what are some elements of good communication. If you had to summarize, what have we seen from all the verses? If you had to summarize, what is good communication? And again, feel free to type things in, or you can unmute yourself and give a couple words that might summarize. So what, if you had to sort of boil all this down into a couple words, what would you say is good communication? Any thoughts from you, Tom?
Clear.
Okay. So it's clear. Yeah. Understandable. My husband's a counselor, so he has a little bit of experience in this. A lot of people communicating or not communicating.
Understanding of the other.
And understanding, yeah.
Rainey says helpful, kind, and necessary.
Oh, awesome. Is there something that I'm not? Oh, I have to scroll down in the chat box. Yeah, sorry. That's why I can't see anything. Okay. Maria, would you mind reading those to me when they...
Sure. Pam says honest.
Okay, great. Thank you. I can't do both of these at the same time.
Sure, that's fine. Donna says compassionate.
Okay, compassionate. I'm sorry. I'm like,
Rainey said,
why aren't I seeing any answers? Okay, compassionate. What else?
Rainey says helpful, kind, and necessary.
Helpful, kind.
The missionary from India who said that.
Oh.
I said thoughtful, considerate, respectful.
Thoughtful, considerate, respectful. So there were probably all sorts of good ideas that I didn't see for the other thing we were discussing.
Donna says patient.
Patient, yes. Okay, awesome. And I see somebody is talking about trying to persuade. Yeah. Okay.
Pam says listening.
Listening is so important. Yes. Okay. And we can try to persuade, right? Even though, but that can't be necessarily our main goal. And yeah. Okay. All right. And there's lots of things up there that I missed. Sorry about talking to people at the barn and at the nursing home, and we're showing our children things. Yeah. Okay. Communicating with everybody. Eye contact, text on the phone. Okay, and there's a couple more here about advocacy, and evangelism, sharing our faith. Okay. So what about bad communication? I'll try to keep up with these. What are some things that we should not be doing as we communicate? Yeah, not dominating, right? Very true. Very true. Thank you, Donna. And not, I don't know if we read specific verses about this, but not twisting the truth, right? God really likes it when we are honest, not argumentative. Argue. Yeah.
The R.
Argue. I can't spell when I'm up
R
here.
before G.
Argumentative, not manipulative, right? Awesome. Yeah. Argumentative. There we go. Not unrestrained and not defensive. Yeah. Okay. And not unrestrained, because we talked about how not unrestrained, because it said the wise man is keeping himself under control, right? And not just blurting out things. So, very good. Okay. So as you think through these ways to communicate and you think through debate, I think it's very easy to see that the way we debate should be pretty much the same way that we should talk in everyday life. We should be helpful and kind and compassionate and considerate. If our opponent is just really lost and doesn't know what they're doing, we should help them out. We should be kind. And I've seen rounds where, like when my son was debating, and they got totally new debaters, and I think one even had a speech impediment, and they just had nothing. The other team had nothing to talk about when they came up to cross X. And so my son's partner said something like, well, because, the person who's coming in cross X is supposed to ask questions of the team that just presented their case, and they had no idea what to ask. So she said, well, would you like to ask me about this? And she sort of just kind of spoon-fed her some things that she could ask about, and it was just really sweet. She wasn't trying to dominate and show that the other team knew nothing. She was trying to help them out. So I think you can see that these things would apply in the debate round, just like they do any other time. Okay, and so here's a great verse to use for your debaters. I didn't even know this was in here until I started teaching debate. Proverbs 18:23, the first to present his case seems right, till another comes forward and questions him. So did you know that was in there? So debate is right in the Bible. Very cool stuff. Yeah. And when you think about, I don't know, I have this picture of Jewish rabbis and teachers all sitting around debating things. So I think there's plenty of debates happening in the Bible. Even the book of, is it Amos, I think? It's kind of a debate between God and the people of Israel. And they're saying, I didn't know about this. And he says, well, I'm going to question you. And then there's a chapter in Job where it says, brace yourself. I'm going to question you like a man. So I think there is a bit of cross-examination in the Bible. All right. Any questions about that before I'm going to move on and talk to you about a couple different philosophies that a person can have in debate. I've got some great quotes from a resource, and then I'll share some resources with you and open it up for questions. All right. So, a tale of two philosophies. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, or maybe the best of debates and the worst of debates. There were two competing philosophies in ancient Greece, the Sophists and the true rhetoricians led by Plato and Aristotle. I'm going to read you a couple quotes that will sort of bring out the difference between these two. And you may have heard of them already, since teaching rhetoric is one of our themes in classical conversations. But this from a book called Upside Down Debate, which is written by an alumni of a couple different debate leagues named Isaiah McPeak. This book's available on Amazon, and it's one of my favorites for really getting to the heart of what debate is for, and what we should be thinking as we debate. Donna, I think that was the NIV, although I might have snagged it off of a computer program. I don't remember, but I think it's from the NIV. If I got the wrong reference, tell me. Here's this quote from Upside Down Debate. In a world where people too often think of communication as a means of domination, getting what you want and looking good, rhetoric is dead. Upside Down Debate is our attempt to train a generation to learn debate differently, advising audiences to make great decisions, deep listening, seeking to make others whole through conflict resolution, and persuasion that ultimately removes self as an obstruction of ideas worth sharing. Wow. If debate really looked like that, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? I think it'd be pretty cool. So that's what we're trying to do in CC, is to try to take debate not as something where you have the fanciest arguments and then you win, but more that you win life. You win to listen. You learn to be wise, and you learn to think of others better than yourself, and you love your audience by debating well. You love your audience by presenting your arguments well and preparing well, just like we try to do with them in class and in seminars, especially in the upper challenges. All right, here's another sort of continuing from that quote. Rhetoric isn't about sounding good. It's about thinking well first and earning the right to speak well second. Upside Down is inspired by Rabbi Yeshua's message to live a life differently in the kingdom of God here and now alongside everyone else. For debaters, here's what it means. Let's flesh it out. We value listening over speaking. We relish creatively analyzing an argument while never advocating a position with which you do not agree. Most people think you must make this compromise to debate. We do not. And I would say that I tell that to my students. Find something you love on whatever side you're debating. And that's what you debate. That's what you present. You don't argue for a position that you don't agree with. It means that we love the audience more than self, while hoping for the best result, even if your opponent is the one that has it. That's a tricky one for most kids. It means we like it when truth wins, not necessarily when I win. Cutting no corners, going through the narrow gate of research, discipline, and intellectual honesty. Turning conflict into healing. Not proving my side, but connecting audiences with higher ideals and sharing the experience, choosing to view listeners as ends rather than as means to your own ends. And this might mean a little bit more to people who are involved in competitive debate, but I think it applies to the CC classroom as well and to what we're trying to do. Okay, so if my computer will help me, we will go on to the next one. Here we go. Come on, buddy. There we go. We also call this light side rhetoric, an allusion to the Jedi and the Sith of Star Wars fame, who use power for others or for self. In this, we invite you to join Plato and Aristotle in the ancient battle against the sophists, those abusers of rhetoric, who glory in persuading audiences of that which they do not believe. So sophistry was that idea that, that they're on the dark side. They're like, I've got these skills, I'm going to use them to win the argument. I'm tickling itching ears, and it doesn't really matter if it's true. I just want everyone to agree with me. And if you think about it, that's dangerously close to what some people think debate is. But we would say no. No, debate is learning to search for truth as an academic exercise with these people who are on the journey together with you, We're going to teach each other about how to search for truth. So that's how I like to see debate. That's how I like to present it to my students, as a search for truth. Some of them don't buy it. They're like, no, it's all about winning. But again, another verse in Proverbs, how much better to get wisdom than gold, to choose understanding rather than silver. So here we are. We're looking at, it's not about who wins and who loses. It's about searching for truth. So if we think of the debate round, it's not me against my opponent. It's my opponent and I against wrong thinking and bad logic and untruth. And so if they correct my thinking in cross-examination or in their rebuttals, I say, oh, that's great. Thank you for pointing that out. I didn't realize that my thinking was in error on that point. And I concede wherever I can. Wherever I see truth, I admit that and I go with the truth. And then I stick with my case, with what is needed, with what's still true. So we don't want to be like the folks in Mark, talked about in Mark 8:36, thinking about gaining the world but losing our soul. That's not what we're interested in. Yeah. And Rainey says, right, sometimes if winning feels empty, then she can tell that she's been relying a little more than she should have, probably, on loving winning instead of loving the truth. Right. Yeah, thank you. That's true. Okay, and I think I had another thought here. Yes, I have a quote. So, heaven or Harvard, you may have heard a seminar on this. It's something that came, I think, perhaps from a CC webinar. But there's a quote from Teaching from Rest by Sarah Mackenzie, which says, if you could have a guarantee that your child would be a national merit scholar and get into a prestigious college, have good work habits and a successful career, but that your relationship with him would be destroyed in the process, would you do it? Of course not. Right? If we had to choose heaven or Harvard, we need to choose heaven. And if we were choosing Harvard or relationship, we would choose relationship. And so the same thing here. If you're choosing to be this amazing debater, but you have not love, you're a clanging gong or a resounding cymbal. So good to remind our students of that. And a quote from The Question by Lee Bortons, which probably many of you have seen. She says, David Hicks was in his book Norms and Nobility argues that the point of education is to make nobility a normative practice. In other words, for the classical educator, it is normal for students to end their formal schooling as noble creatures. This is the point of education. So if that's how we're thinking about debate, we think, where would these skills help us? If we're able to search for truth, whether we're thinking on the right side or the wrong side, we're willing to correct our thinking in order to line up with truth. If we're able to discuss something without getting defensive, if we're able to truly listen, to disagree without being disagreeable, discuss the issue gently with respect to not be against the person, but to be against falsehood and be with the person. What are some areas of life where that could help us? Can you see that? Where would that be helpful for us or our students or anybody? What areas of life is that skill going to help them in? Do you have a thought on that, Tom? Yeah, Pam says, in marriage, in the workplace, in the church, everywhere. Exactly. Parenting, evangelism. Thank you. Yeah, basically everywhere, right? If we are people who can discuss things reasonably, think of how a political discourse in our country, oh my goodness, would be if people actually listened to each other and didn't attack each other as, oh, if you believe this, you must be an awful person. But instead, I see, politics, there we go. Thank you, Pam. If we're both saying, oh, I see, we're both trying to help solve this problem, we disagree with how to get there, let's talk graciously about it. That would be a refreshing conversation to hear, would it not? Yeah. So, and maybe I'll let the marriage counselor weigh in and say, do you have anything to add to that? Like, what have you seen in your office about how people communicate and whether this would be helpful or not?
People don't listen. They come in with pre-assumed ideas of what the other person stands for. I think I can hear through your mic, but yeah.
Okay, so he's saying people really don't listen when they're in the marriage counseling room. Okay, well, I would like to share some resources with you guys, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions, because I know you might just have some really specific things that you're working through because of where you are in your debate experience and what classes you're working on. So my favorite resource is, of course, the book of Proverbs, especially that section in 15 through 19. If you just read a couple verses with your students or your kids, it's all over the place. Stuff about motives and communication and love and self-control and anger, and it's just all over there. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. And then my favorite book is Upside Down Debate by Isaiah McPeak. It's available on Amazon, and actually the introduction and the first chapter are available free on Amazon, as a preview, and those alone are worth the purchase price. I think it might be $10, and you can read it on a Kindle version or something, and it's just super, very classically minded and very grounded in Christian thought. There's also a resource called Ziggy Online Debate, and this is where kids sign up to debate once a week for about 10 weeks. They debate the same resolution every time, and it's very inexpensive, maybe $20, something like that. And the beauty about this is that moms can watch their kids debate, and it's just once a week, so they can sort of improve along the way. If you have kids that really would like to try this a little bit more, or you could sign up to judge something like that. And it doesn't really matter because people don't get big prizes or anything, but it just would give you experience at hearing people debate. It's from all over the country, some really gifted ones, some new ones, whatever. NCFCA is the National Christian Forensics and Communication Association. I put their website down there. They have tournaments throughout New Hampshire. They have 2 in New Hampshire this year, one in April and one in, I'm not sure when, but you can contact me for more information if you'd like to go and watch some debate. Sometimes the best way to teach your students debate is to go watch people debate. I really recommend that. And we have a one-day tournament coming up actually on November 3rd in Londonderry, New Hampshire. So if that's close to anybody, feel free to check that out. And again, contact me and I can give you information about that. It's on the NCFCA website, but it's a little tricky to find it. So that's why I'd say you might want to contact me.
Hey, Leslie?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's really hard or it's hard for me, maybe it's my eyes, but just the font in yellow. Could you copy those slides and put them in the chat log or?
Sure. Yeah, or I could maybe change that color. They just sort of came out that way. But let's see if I can do that differently. How about if I put them all in black? Oh, see, they're not coming out there. So let me see.
Maybe if you copied them, put them in the chat log.
I can do that? Okay, let me try to do that. All right. Oh, there it is. It's pretty big. Is that going to work?
Let's see. I guess I gotta scroll down. How can
I'm not sure that's going to work right now, but you can just Google Upside Down Debate on Amazon. You can find that. That just turned up when I touched that thing in the chat log. And you could also just Google Ziggy Online Debate, and you can Google NCFCA. So, yeah, sorry, it's not letting me change that color. So thanks for saying that. Oh, Donna said she took a screenshot, and so she can enlarge it later, and that would be fine. I can also send these slides out to you guys if you're interested.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay, good. Another resource is Ethos Debate. If you just Google that, they have great articles from a classical perspective, and they're pretty much my heroes when it comes to debate. And then on Ethos, they have a YouTube channel, and they have a sample debate, lots of sample debates on there. I'm going to try to show us one before we go off here, just a little clip of some cross-ex that will show you the conversational stuff I'm talking about. And then it's not Memoria Press. It's Monument Publishing. Monument Publishing is a source where if you decide in teaching your kids debate, you would like to have a case that's already written so that they can focus on just the rhetoric side of things, presenting arguments and that sort of thing. That's a place where you can find cases, and they call them source books of cases. And then I have a link here to a lecture about cross-examination, which is often one of the hardest things to grasp in debate because it happens so much on the spot. You have to think on your feet. So there's a lecture about that. He's not coming from a classical mindset. So sometimes he says the purpose of cross-ex is to make your opponent look bad, which I would not agree with. I would say it's to find errors in your thinking and your logic, both you and your opponent, and to have a conversation about it. So, but those are some resources that could be helpful for you. And so what I'm going to do now is just play a quick sample of a debate from that Ethos. This is about 8 minutes into a debate. So this guy has just finished doing his affirmative constructive. This is a Lincoln Douglas round, actually, which means just two people debating. And so they're debating about what's good. And so this his opponent is going to come up and ask him some questions. So I'm going to play this. If this is not coming through for you, just chat it as soon as we start, and I'll see what I can do. I'm just going to catch up on the chat log here while we're doing this. So Rainey says, it strikes me in this conversation the responsibility that we hold teaching our children this skill. That is so true. Yeah, very much so. Oh, and thank you for putting that resource in the chat log. Thank you very much, Pam. And then also Rainey says, if we do it without being under authority, it could be disastrous, right? Because then again, it's communication that's seeking our own good and seeking our own glory instead of seeking the good of others. And then Pam put the links there. Thank you, Pam. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to listen to I'm going to play this again for it's about a 3-minute cross-examination time, which is again when the two debaters are up front talking to each other. And this, of course, was an online debate, so it looks a little funny, and one guy's going to be frozen, but you can just listen to the conversation. And again, chat me if it's not working, if you can't hear it.
Discuss your first, that of the test. You're proposing this idea that there are basically 5 basic criminal schools of thought in the justice system, correct? All going on at once, yes. All going on at once. So we can agree that looking at any one of them in a vacuum is going to be a disadvantageous look at the resolution as compared to trying to have a summation of all of them.
Yes, I think they should be all arranged side by side somehow.
Isn't that more realistic? Because, I mean, if you're looking at criminal sentencing and how judges actually sort of prescribe treatment or punishments for criminals, a lot of the sentences they give have numerous parts of these 5 different individual things intertwined within, correct?
Yes, they're always balancing.
Okay. Now, I'd like to look at your third point under the test, that of the resolutional burden for the affirmative side. Can we agree that in order to prove this resolution true, you have to prove that we ought to be consistently placing higher emphasis on rehabilitation than retribution?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what does that look like in a practical sense? It's one thing to say teaching is better than vengeance, but where is the practical application in that? Where do we see this part of the resolution played out in a contemporary sense?
A judge should not sentence to vengeance without first having looked at the future of what is going to change for this criminal via some prior part of the sentence. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So suppose we had a criminal who was a little bit unhinged, and the judge was deliberating whether or not to give him an overly retributive sentence or an overly rehabilitative sentence. One maybe came at the expense of the other, just based on the individual. Is it your stance as the affirmative that in that sort of a scenario we ought to choose the rehabilitative sentence rather than the retributive one?
If the person's mentally ill, yes.
Okay. All right. So now I'd like to look at your second point, that of basically retribution has less value than rehabilitation. Just so we're on the same page for moving forward with this round, it's your contention essentially that the top three forms in your mind of criminal justice, that of restoration, restitution, and incapacitation, that those three schools of thought basically subsume all of the positive things we could get out of retribution, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. So that's just a little sample of what, oops, let me put my thing back in here. I hope you can hear me now. Yeah, he's so smart and confident, isn't it? Isn't it true? Says Donna. So, what's your reaction after seeing that? Did anybody have a reaction they'd like to share?
Well, you can tell he listened to his opponent and brought up his points and negated them as politely as possible. I don't.
Yeah. He was very polite. And now let me just tell you that so these guys are coaches. They like people pay to have them coach them in debate. So they're the best of the best. And the one guy who was frozen, unfortunately, you didn't get to see him do very much, but he has done basically every form of college and high school debate and, won all sorts of things. So they're very good, and they can be confident and calm and nice, partly because they're so good at it. And well prepared. But so this isn't where we're going to get right away, but it helps you to see it can be a conversation, right? And Pam says the questions really help to clarify the issues. So when you think about this search for truth, right? It should be two friends coming together to talk about an issue that has good on both sides. And you say, well, are you saying this? Well, yeah. Well, not exactly. No, I'm saying this. And so it can really help to clarify. If you think about that, that's what eventually, when they're towards the end of challenge, they should be able to really use questions to help clarify what does somebody mean, and to find the areas where it might be fudging on truth a little bit and where they haven't been clear. So Donna says, yeah, I need to do some impromptu games in class. It's true. This takes a long time to get there, so don't be too intimidated. I know it's intimidating. But yes, years. These guys have honed their skills for years and years. But your students can learn some of that, especially if they're debating on a topic that's somewhat familiar to them. Now, I apologize. I didn't even tell you what the topic was that they were debating. It was about the criminal justice system and whether rehabilitation or retribution was better, which you probably figured that out. But that wasn't the point. That the point was they've thought about things and now they're talking about it as friends, trying to bring clarity to the situation. Yeah, the importance of definitions, says Rainey, and the 5 common topics were right in there, right? They were defining, they were comparing, they were talking about the impact of things, what happened before and after. So, yeah. And he was repeating things to be clear. Yeah, that's true, Donna. Thank you. And relationship. You could see that they could be friends and still debate. And that's what you want. You don't want to destroy relationships for the sake of a debate round. So, okay, you know what? I have one slide that I forgot, I skipped in my craziness of my computers that I would love to show you, and then we can do whatever questions you guys have. So let's talk a little bit about stock issues and values, which are things we use when you're teaching different kinds of debate in CC. Stock issues are the way, they're fancy words used in team policy debate: topicality, inherency, significance, and solvency, which I hardly ever judge team policy debate, actually, because I was always stumped by these words. But basically what they mean is the ways we usually make a decision, right? Topicality means, are we on the subject? If you tell your students, write a paper about whether Johnny Tremaine should have worked on Sunday, and he writes a paper about whether or not Ahab should have chased the whale, he's not on topic. He's not on the subject. Or if you have you're discussing with your child whether or not he should make his bed before he leaves the room in the morning, and he wants to talk about whether or not he should have more candy, whatever. It's not on the subject, and that's not a helpful discussion. So inherency is there even a problem? If you again, you and your child are talking about, we should delay the start time of our homeschool an hour so that I'll be rested and I'll get all my work done. You might question whether or not there's even a problem with starting school at the hour that you're starting it. If their evidence is, I feel tired and I like to sleep, that's not really enough evidence to show that there's a problem. Significance is the problem big enough to care about? If this problem is only going to be a problem if the sleep police visit the house and we're going to get a fine, I don't think that's very likely. Or if aliens, come and visit the earth, whatever. Is the problem big enough to care about, big enough to be significant? And then solvency is, will your solution fix the problem? So these are all things that we really talk about these things when we're making a decision, whether it's where to go to vacation or whether we should have chores in our house or whether we should get up and start school an hour later. We really talk about these issues all the time. So if I let you get up an hour later, you have less time in the day to do your work. Are you really going to be able to get your work done? Is that going to solve the problem? So those are just things we really talk about in real life. So don't be afraid of those. And value is in Lincoln Douglas debate, which they start in challenge 2, I believe, and then do it in challenge 2 and challenge 3. That is to solve the question, it's better for what? So if my resolution is broccoli is better than boots, well, it's better for what? Am I cooking dinner or am I going on a hike? So I have to know, yeah, thanks, Pam. They do that in challenge 2. It's better for what? If it depends on what you're doing, that will determine what's better. So in Lincoln Douglas debate, we pick a value that helps us to see, sort of helps us to weigh and measure and see where we're going, and then we can decide what's better. So like in the debate sample that you saw, rehabilitation versus retribution, if your goal is to prevent crime, then you would present statistics and things that talk about how either rehabilitation or retribution prevent crime, or if it's to protect human rights, if that's your goal, then you would present information for that. So questions about that? I know this is stuff that might be new to people if you haven't taught debate yet or haven't seen much debate yet. I'm just trying to normalize it and make you see that it's really what we do in everyday communication. So any questions on that? And Thanks, Pam. Nice comment there about, yeah, my sons are in Pam's classes, have done a lot of debating. Okay, so feel free to ask questions. Oh, thank you, Kimberly. Feel free to ask questions if you have some. I just want to, you know what I'll do is I'm going to close us out, and then if you have questions, feel free to stay on and text them in or just chat with me. I just like to say, it could be the best of debates or the worst of debates. Which ones will your students give? And I'm not talking about having a hard time speaking and giving their words. I'm saying, are their motivations and their heart and their character as they debate, is that going to be the best or the worst? And you guys can be a big influence on how your students do that, just on what you present, what you focus on as you present it. So we want to focus on how would Jesus debate? And that's how we want our students to debate. How, of course, he was omniscient, so there's a little problem comparing there. But he put some of that aside, when he was here on this earth.
It's still an ideal.
Yeah, it's the ideal. We want to say, how would Jesus love others? How would he love his opponents? How would he love his audience? And that sort of thing. So Pam would love a copy of those slides, and likewise, I'll send slides to anybody who wants them. And so I'm going to close us out because I know it's 8 o'clock, but I will be here for a while if anyone has any questions. All right. All right, I'm going to have my DH, my hubby, pray to close us out.
Oh, Father, thank you for the resources you provide for Leslie and her work, Lord, for all the people that have contributed, for all the tutors and teachers in the work they do with the students, with the parents. And Lord, help us to help our students not to be afraid, to see the value of debating like Christ. Lord, to recognize even though we fall far short, you and your Holy Spirit are moving us in that direction. Well, thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name.
Amen. And thank you all for your contributions. Sorry I missed some of them at the beginning, but thanks for typing those in. So any questions that you guys have, and it can be as specific as you want about, I'm trying to teach rebuttals to my students, and I just don't know how to do that.
Hi, Leslie. This is
Hi.
Donna.
Hi, Donna. How are you? I think we might have emailed before, did we?
Yes, because you recommended the Upside Down debate, and I grabbed it on my Kindle. So.
Oh, awesome. So you've probably heard most of these already.
No, I haven't, read through the whole thing yet.
Okay.
But I did, I was wondering I direct Challenge 1, and we're entering week 10, and week 11, we're supposed to be starting our debates.
Okay.
It says debates begin, and unfortunately, I didn't catch in the guide that my students were supposed to be preparing not just the 1AC and researching the negative side, but that they should have their 1AC cross-examination, 1NC cross-examination, and then 2AC cross-examination, and 2NC. I didn't see that in the guide, so I just told them, I guess you just, it says keep researching with your partner the negative side, and so that's what my students have been doing. We wrote our 1AC, we have all that done, and they've just been researching the negative side.
Right. Yeah.
So what, I've got 1 week to prepare them.
Right, right. Well, you know what? You don't have to stick with the schedule that's in the guide. The guide is a guide, and
Okay.
some people say, I really can't do it in that amount of time, and that's fine. So especially so they've been doing some great research, and that's fantastic. So you could say, okay, I'm going to give you, you just sort of modify it to bring them from where they are to where you need to be. So you might say, next week, let's take all the research you've organized and try to find 3 points, to boil down in your negative against, because for their neg, they're guessing, they're sort of guessing a few different aff arguments they might hear, right? And trying to come up with other ideas against them. So you might say, choose the 3 aff arguments that you think you're most likely to hear and try to come up with 2 points against each one of them. Or something like that. So you're just going to help them to organize what they have and put it in a format that'll be helpful for them to find once they figure out what the affirmative is going to do. Or, for your first one, you could even say, the affirmative is going to talk about this. You could even say what the topics are and have everybody know which side they're going to be on, so it's not a surprise.
Okay. Yeah. Did I miss something in the guide?
I haven't been. You're in challenge 1?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not in challenge 1 this year, so I don't know what the guide said. So I have to say I don't really know. But it doesn't really matter. Your job is to help them prepare for debate from wherever they're at.
Yeah, and this week I had encouraged them all to watch the DVD that's in the policy debate book, and encourage them to just kind of watch that with the commentary.
Yes, that's really helpful. Yeah, is it the Christie Shipe debate?
No,
Or the
they
new?
don't use that.
Okay, because that's really intimidating.
Classical Conversations put out the introduction to Pure Guide policy debate. Very, very, very condensed, like almost nothing compared to the other one.
Right, and I think that's appropriate. And so what topic are they debating on that one? I think I have it, but I haven't watched it yet. Is it Christmas trees or cats and dogs?
Yeah, Christmas carols.
Christmas carols, yeah. Okay. That's good. I think it's really helpful for people to see if you start at a level where they understand the topic. That way they're not, we're classical. You learn the grammar, and then you wrestle with the dialectic, and then you get rhetorical about it. But they're trying to learn debate. And so if you can give them a topic that's easy, then they can focus on learning debate and not also learn that topic at the same time.
We did the first one that was listed in our guide, which was that the United States should change their penal code to abolish the death penalty.
Okay. Which is a little tricky, but kind of familiar.
Yeah, that was the first one that was listed, and so we've definitely I think they've done really well researching both sides.
Good.
Yeah, we even had the discussion, well, now that you've looked at both sides, has it changed your position in any way?
Right.
The position you previously held, and surprisingly they were like, nope, hasn't changed our opinion. None of them.
But maybe they understand a little bit more now why there are 2 sides and why other people think.
Yeah, they definitely have. It's really brought about a lot of neat discussions, and they were bringing the different things they were finding online. So research was definitely done. I just did not catch in the guide that we had to prepare the whole thing by week 11. It just says debates begin. I'm like, what?
Right. Well, and so part of that is also as you teach them through, so let's say the negative speeches, they really don't prepare those, as much because they have hopefully some quotes and some ideas, but most of that's just responding to what comes up in the round.
Okay.
But the affirmative side should have parts of theirs prepared. But remember, they too are going to be responding to what the negative said. So they can have a few extra. The 1 AC and the 2 AC can be prepared. But the affirmative rebuttals, those you just say, well, remember my opponent said this, but remember I said this, and here's some additional whatever. So
I don't think we're doing rebuttals. That's one thing I did.
Oh, yes. Right. The first time you don't do rebuttals.
Yeah, I think that comes second semester.
Right.
So we're really just this time trying to get through the 1 and 2 ACs and the 1 and 2 NCs, and then the cross-examinations in between each.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we practice flowing in class. We tried getting that down.
Good.
You know, so I think I've done what I'm supposed to do. It's just that I totally did not see that in the guide. So
yeah.
I was thoroughly confused, but I think we'll be fine. We'll just wing it.
Yeah. And you know, what's the worst thing that can happen, really? So
they're all going to be winners. No child left behind.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a train wreck anyway, so but that's okay. It does take a long time to learn that skill. And I'll tell you, when my kids were first starting, I would debate with them when they didn't have anybody to practice with. And I love speaking, I love teaching, but the timeline, the time constraints and all the things you have to think of on your feet, it's hard. It really takes a long time to learn it.
Yeah. Now, another question I had was, I have an odd number of students, so one team has 3 kids, and so I was wondering, I was just gonna have them each take, one does the 1 AC, and then the next one can do the 2 AC, and then switch up, but I wasn't sure if that was the best way.
Oh, yeah. However you want to divide it is fine, because it's so casual at this point, So they know how it should go officially, but, you modify and you adjust it for your class. And whoever is
so
not...
would you recommend one that's not doing anything? Maybe they should be judging or...
Well, I wouldn't let anybody off the hook. I mean, if you wanted to do that, you could. If you were having several rounds, somebody could they could rotate in watching, because they learn things from watching as well. But when you're up there as a team, there's always things you can be doing. You can be listening to whoever's speaking and say, oh, you write notes, and they have sticky notes that say, ask them about this, or, oh, here's a cross-examination question for the next one, or, oh, okay, you're going to need this piece of evidence. So it's a live fire exercise. So they're all there working together, and
they really have
while it's happening.
Not feel like they're being left out.
Yeah, they're never on vacation while they're up there until they're
all right. So
over.
I have like sticky notepads ready for them. Okay. Yeah. That's good.
Good. That's good. Would so then what are you going to do after this debate? Are you going to do pick a different topic, or are you going to do the same topic?
I think we're going to pick a different topic. We had talked about doing something about the state of Maine. So like the state of Maine, should change its current, policy on driving and cell phones or something. We were trying to find something.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. And don't be afraid to, I know that the kids don't usually like to do this, but it's okay to even have several debates on one topic. It's actually really good for them, because then they get more comfortable and used to it, and they can start talking about it.
What do you mean, several debates on? Oh, you mean keep the death penalty for second semester?
You could and add rebuttals, or you could do have this debate where you set up the teams, and then next week you switch them and have whoever was affirmative is now negative, so that they have a couple chances to debate on the same subject.
Yeah, I told them that they're not going to know which side they're going to be debating until class starts, and I'll let them know. So they got to be prepared.
They have to be prepared, and as they get more advanced, that's they can deal with that. It's not cheating when they're learning this to give them a few hints beforehand. Which side of the ground. If you think that's good for them, that's fine. You can do that, and they actually will be very grateful if you did.
Yeah, they have researched so much that I really think that they'll be fine.
Okay, that's excellent.
Whichever side they have to do, I think they're going to be ready. They just didn't know. Oh my goodness, I have to write up a 1 NC and now a 2 NC. I got to be prepared for that. It's just a little shocking.
It is. It's a little stressful.
If you look at the guide, it didn't say anything. So
I'm sorry to hear that. You should probably send that along. Maria, are you listening? or talk with your SR or with Maria and send that up the chain to say if this is missing, it should be in there.
It just it says that debates will begin. It says week 11, but all the at home and in community instruction, it didn't say that. I thought we were just doing the 1 AC and researching the negative, and that's what we were be doing.
Right. So that would be good to clarify. And Maria, I don't know if you're on, if you have any more insight into that.
Yeah, I would just send it to the academic advisor for challenge 1.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And and lay it all out there, because they're the ones that are going to be instrumental in making any changes.
And it could totally be me missing the point. So maybe Maria, I'll show it to you. I'll bring my guide.
Okay.
And show it to you. But my daughters and I both, we went through it and we were like, whoa, yeah, we didn't realize that. It didn't really tell us that. So.
Yeah, one thing to check is that little timeline that they have across the top now in the guide, where when there's a long-term project, it kind of says to start doing this on, whatever week. So you may want to look and check and see if it had that or not. But if it didn't, it needs to be put in there. And it needs to be clear, like when you're debating.
Yeah,